Dr. Tim here again with Larry Pearl, who has just an amazing story. Every time I hear it, and I've spoke to Larry several times and have had the privilege of hearing him speak, it just truly amazes me. So Larry has been on a very interesting journey, really for the last 20 plus years, but really his life has changed significantly over the last couple years or so. He was at one point 407 pounds. He's now down about 240 pounds. And he's going to tell us the story about, really how he did it. He has not had any gastric bypass surgery, nothing like that. This is all based really on the central theme of what I try to teach my patients, which is training. Larry, or LP as he likes to go by, really learned what it was to train his mind and train his body, and he's had some tremendous success to show for that. So LP, welcome. Always a joy to be with you and to talk with you. You truly are inspirational. I've done a lot of sports and run 12 marathons myself, and I still find your story very inspiring. Let's start at kind of the beginning of what led to not a very good place. I understand that you had a pretty significant trauma happen to you in, I believe it was 1980, is that correct?
1981.
Okay.
I was involved in a car crash on December the 26th. I was a passenger in a vehicle. We hit some black ice at 35 miles an hour. I was projected out of the vehicle, hit a tree with my body, and then the vehicle landed on top of me. Sustained substantial back injuries, hip problems, knee problems, and when I woke up, my best friend was just at the end of my arm's reach, and he was the driver, and he was killed in the accident, and that was blamed myself for that for a long time, and had to work through that to get beyond to where I am today.
So when you say that you blamed yourself for that, what did that attitude bear out in your life as far as behaviors?
I began to be very reclusive, lived up on the hills, and I went into work from time to time just to make money, but most of the time I was either on the inside or the outside of my front door wishing I could participate in life, hating myself enough not to allow myself to do it.
And you used food as a means of escape, I'm assuming?
I did. Food was I used it for celebrations, I used it for anger, I used it for everything. And food and alcohol, both.
So, and that ended up with your peak weight of 407 pounds.
407, yeah.
Okay. So, one of the things I like to bring out is that it's not about trying hard to lose weight, it's about training. And you really basically trained yourself to be 407 pounds, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it was nobody else's elbow pushing the food in. It was all my choice. And the more that I ate, the more frustrated I got at myself, and the more frustrated I got at myself, the more I ate. And it was just a continual swirl downhill, tighter and tighter. And if there was any good things that happened in my universe at that time, I would eat too, because it was what everything was based around.
So there was always an excuse to eat.
Yeah.
I'm sad, I'm going to eat, it'll make me feel better. I'm happy, I'm going to celebrate with a bowl of ice cream.
That's right.
Okay, I understand. Interesting. So the next step I always like to talk about is training, and then it's awareness. So you had this terrible accident, which you blamed yourself for. That caused this really self-deprecating attitude, which then affected your behaviors and obviously affected your health significantly. How long did it take before you became aware of the fact, or when did you become aware of the fact that, well, something's got to change, that it can't go on like this?
Probably about 30 years almost of being reclusive, and just felt like I could no longer be where I was at. I got up in the morning and felt like something had to change. I was either going to get back out in society and be with some people and get back to that, or I was going to do something to terminate, my existence. And it had just got to the place where I couldn't sleep, I couldn't, waking hours, everything was surrounded by that accident. And I just got so depressed, and I didn't reach out for a lot of help for a long time.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So it was not like, we see sometimes on TV where it's an intervention, where friends came and dragged you out and put you in food rehab, or you had the burning bush talking to you, it's, Larry, you have to change. It was more what I like to refer to sometimes as really the gift of despair. You got to the point where you realized
something had to change. Yeah.
You're on the floor. You're either you're I mean, in a sense, you were chronically committing suicide.
Basically, yeah, very slow.
And so, if I'm going to do it slow, I might as well do it fast. And you still had enough will to live that said, okay, well, if I'm going to do that, then I might as well just try hard to live.
Yeah.
And it actually was that you trained hard to live, is what I would argue.
Okay.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, because a lot of people go through a lot of pain and a lot of despair, and they kind of give up. But there is a gift in there too, I think. I mean, I think the reason we feel so down in those situations is because there's still a spark of life left, which is very interesting. So 30 years of awareness, but the behavior didn't really change for a long period of time. And it just basically, you got to a point where you had to make a change or die.
Yeah.
Okay. So what did you do when it came to making a change? That now that attitude started to shift a little bit, what did you do?
Started eating a little bit different. Although a friend of mine came by the house and like I mentioned before, had basically said, LP, why are you trying to kill yourself? You're worth more than that, and get out and start exercising. And I gave him all the excuses that I had, that my hips hurt and my knees were shot and I got 3 crushed vertebrae in my back, and in 2005 I crashed a motorcycle and blacked out with my diabetes and I had all the excuses and was applicable to go on disability because of all the excuses that I used. And he said, just get out and start walking. Give me 15 minutes a day. You're worth it. And others had come by and talked to me before, and I've seen it happen a lot of times through my life, that the right person comes along, you hear the right words, you actually listen to them, and you can do this, I can do this. And that I can do this attitude switched from I can't do anything anymore because of poor me to I'm going to show you that I can do this. I am worthy.
Really amazing. I talk a little bit about, kind of an equation for success, which is A plus B equals S. And what that is attitude plus behavior equals success. I mean, you have to have the attitude, because it's that emotional stuff that really, I think, drives us as human beings to change what we do. And then that changing of what we do, obviously, is a thing that changes our lives. It changes our health. It changes our weight. And you're a living example of that.
It changes our perception of ourselves, too.
Well, exactly. Well, just like you talked about what I call the death spiral, there's a life spiral. Okay, I can walk 5 feet, now I can walk 10 feet, now I can walk... So let's talk a little bit about that. That's actually pretty interesting. When you started exercising, how long ago was that?
About a year and a half.
And you could walk how far?
I could walk about 5 steps without getting out of breath. Walking up 5 steps to my trailer, the 5 steps I would have to pause before I opened the door.
Okay, so you could walk 5 steps. How many steps do you, or it's not steps anymore. How many miles do you average a week now?
A week?
Walking, running, whatever, jogging?
Mostly walking. I've been averaging about 20 miles a week to 37 miles a week in between there.
So you're close to 30 if you average those.
If you averaged out, probably close to 30.
Now I understand that there's a very particular half marathon that you want to participate in, but doesn't come around until next year, and you said, forget it, I'm not going to pay $65 until I can do the race I want to do, and so you just did your own race.
I did. I was going to go around Crater Lake, and it came on a Saturday, the same Saturday that I had organized a walk for our local TOPS groups in Lebanon, Sweet Home, Albany, and Lacombe area, and I went ahead and walked with those folks instead of doing the half marathon around Crater Lake. And I got to thinking, well, if I'm going to do that, and it's one of the things I set myself up for this year for being able to do, and one of my goals that I wanted to do. I thought, well, why don't I just go ahead and walk around the area? So I got in my car the 22nd of August this month, and I drove out to an area away from the house and clocked out 13.2 miles and drove back to the driveway. It was a beautiful morning, put my shoes on and started. And it was about 7:30 when I left the house. 4 hours and 15 minutes later, I had finished my 13.2 miles, and picked up the phone and called my adopted daughter and said, "Guess what Dad did?" You know,
Fantastic.
way cool.
So from a year and a half ago when you couldn't go 5 feet, what did you weigh then?
Around 340 pounds, 350, something.
So that was
like
about 100 pounds ago?
I'm at 180 now.
Oh, so it was like way more
Yeah.
than 100. Okay, so you were at 407 was your peak.
Mm-hmm.
340 when you started exercising, so you
Yeah.
lost about 60, almost 70 pounds.
Yeah.
Could still only go about 5 feet.
Only, yeah,
And now you just did 13 miles.
I did. Yeah.
Wow, and that's actually, when you think of it, not a tremendously long period of time, because it was really only a year and a half.
Yeah.
And I've talked to people who are already running, and they're like, "How long do I need to train for a marathon?" I'm like, "Well, really, not that long. You just have to have the program and stick to it." Speaking of which, when one of the things I talk about is personal awareness, and really what that translates for most people. I mean, there's lots of things. There's the emotional awareness and also all that goes along with it. But practically, the biggest thing is I tell people to write down 3 things: how much television they watch, everything that they eat, and count all your calories so that they know,
Yeah.
and then what they exercise. And I understand you have this book here, and this is sort of your checkbook for life, isn't it?
It really is. It's my weekly weigh-ins for the organization that I work with. It also gives me how many miles I walked per day, per week, what I've done in the past, and it's a ledger to keep going and keep working on this, and it helps me keep accountable with the miles that I can do and the miles that I have done. And from the beginning of January, I was figuring out today, I did 4 miles after the marathon. The next day, took the next day off and only did 1/5 of a mile, but the day after that, the Wednesday, I did another 4 miles. It was 33 miles that week, but I've done 1,019.69 miles from January the 1st till August the 26th. And that's
Wow.
pretty amazing, from thinking that, I could only do 5 steps well,
And a year and 18 months ago. So
Yeah.
what do you think your chances of staying successful and being able to continue to put up this kind of exercise and weight loss if you didn't write it down?
I don't think I would be as successful, or as successful as I am without writing it down, simply because it helps me be accountable to write it down, and it keeps me organized. It gives me something to look forward to. It's creating a habit of walking, rather than laying yourself up and saying, well, I'm going to do this, and try to stay motivated all the time. 'Cause I don't know anybody that can stay motivated all the time.
No.
But if you write this down and say, you know, look what I have done, you know,
Okay.
I can do this and I can continue to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And these are things that in my mind, I have to do so I can stay where I want to be. And if I want to drop down lower, which I really do, as my doctor and I had talked about the weight, my goal weight, which is 165 pounds. And right now I'm at 180. I was a little closer a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Found out about the medical problems that I've been having and stressed out a little bit with that. Didn't stress out to the point where I lost my 100-pound goal since I've joined TOPS in April. But, you know, staying accountable for everything, food intake, walking, attitude,
Mm-hmm.
the whole, I think, you know, it's all combined into a good work ethic. If you don't have a plan to succeed, how are you going to get there?
No, that's exactly right, and we're going to get to that a little bit as we talk about goals next. But there's something there that I heard. Okay, you had a little bit of a bad. I mean, you had a very good week and you had a very bad week in some respects. You know, you did this half marathon on your own,
Mm-hmm.
and then you actually did more than a half marathon. A half marathon is only 13.1 miles.
Okay.
So way to go. But yet you've had a little bit of medical issues lately as well. So what do you do on bad days? What do you do when you cheat and maybe you eat 3 hot dogs or whatever it is that happens? How do you deal with that? Because that happens to everybody. I mean, it's
Well,
not
sure.
none of us is perfect, and regardless of how successful we are, we have to eat. This isn't like quitting, an illicit drug where you never need that drug. You
Sure.
have to eat.
Sure.
So those days where you slip up and maybe you eat a little bit too much, or you don't get out of bed when you really should have and exercise. How do you deal with that so that doesn't come back and start poisoning that attitude that you've spent so long, trying to make right?
Mm. Well, I see that as I stay accountable for that. I keep track of what I do. I don't beat myself up for making mistakes because we all do them,
Mm-hmm.
and which is one of the things that I used to do, and learned that the only true failure is not getting up and going back after it.
Right. And then I find interesting is that, when I speak to larger groups, I always, invariably will talk about fear, and we're going to get to that a little bit in the excuses section of this talk. But the biggest fear that people have is fear of failure, which to me is always such a mystery, because if you don't start at all, you're guaranteeing failure. So you're really guaranteeing what you fear the most by not doing anything at all.
Sure.
And that just seems so bizarre to me. I've heard you say before that, like you said, you keep track, but you don't keep score.
Yeah.
So what does that mean to you?
Well, I used to keep score on everything and use it as an excuse to go ahead and eat. I had a bad day and I ate the 3,000 calories and I'm normally doing 11 to 1,200 calories and I don't go to my bedroom and pour me and get sad and I get back up the next morning and say, there's no quitting. I can start over again today. I don't need to beat myself up for making this. I can do better.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to keep score with it and say, well, okay, I did this bad and how bad I am, and then look at that starting to swirl again and use that as an excuse for failure.
Right. Yeah, and that bad, that scorekeeping really in essence sort of implies, I think, punishment.
Yeah.
It's like I failed myself, therefore I must punish myself.
Yeah, and I'm not worthy, and I am.
Right.
I'm worthy to succeed.
That's exactly right. Very, very interesting. So how to go, obviously you have a tremendous amount of awareness, a tremendous amount of very practical personal awareness as far as, right down to the 10th of a mile that you've walked, so far this year. I would assume that you have some goals. Obviously you had this goal, this half marathon that you've already completed. So where do goals fit in, and how does that kind of keep you going and keep that motivation fresh for you?
Uh, Goals to me are very important, both the short-term and the long-term goals. Uh, Make sure, you know, that it's something that's obtainable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't expect to get out the first day that I walked and walk 8 miles. You know,
Right.
I mean, that's setting myself up to fail miserably. And then, you know, where am I going to stand? Set goals that are obtainable. Goal that I had at first when I joined the TOPS organization, and after getting more information from the Diabetic Center over at Lebanon, was, you know, I can lose 3 pounds a week and be okay. I can lose X amount of weight. I need to walk a little bit farther, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I set a goal to walk out in my pasture for 15 minutes with a friend's help. After I started getting comfortable to do that, I needed to set a larger goal, because that was obtainable. It was obtained and started to get very easy. Needed to progress a little bit farther, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I like talking about, you know, goals being reasonable. In other words, you know, reasonable and obtainable, but then again, not easy, or else it's not really a goal,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, if you're going to go walking, and I've seen people do it a lot of times, and it just baffles me. I walk and I try to get up to 3.5 to 4 miles an hour, because that makes me breathe a little heavier and sweat a little more. I've seen so many people go out and walk, and they can name almost every blade of grass as they go by, and you know, you don't get your body up to a high enough rhythm to go ahead and do anything to really help you. I have friends that work in shops, and I was telling them the miles that I do, and they say, well, they work in a coffee shop, they walk back and forth, they had their little pedometer on, they were doing 10, 15, 20 miles a day. And I was asking them, you know, have you felt any better because you're doing this? And no, and so they're taking 2 or 3 steps and stopping, and taking 2 or 3 steps and stopping. You're not getting,
Exactly right.
you're not getting the exercise that you really
Right.
need to get going. You know, you need to get out and get motivated. I was handicapped in my own mind. You know, I set a prison in my own mind that I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I shouldn't do this.
I'm not that kind of person.
Some people had told me, professional people had told me that I shouldn't be doing this. You're not going to ever be able to do this. And you know, I listened for a long time, and finally got to the place where, you know, they didn't make sense anymore. I had to do something different,
Right.
and started setting more goals. I did the half marathon for myself, and going to do one coming up here. Not sure exactly when, but I'll pay the money and go do it. And the next thing is, you know, get out of the box and do something else, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing because look at all that you can do. Whereas this, you know, you said you had a prison of your own mind, which is true, and you know, you were living in that prison, but it actually also created a prison of your entire body.
Oh,
I mean, you had a very real, very tangible prison that you created because really of how you thought.
Of my perception. Yeah.
And yet, you know, the keys to the prison and the warden was you.
It was all inside. Yeah, I
You know,
held the key.
Yeah, when you decided to unlock, you know, open the door,
Yeah.
you know, the only opinion that really mattered was yours.
Yeah. Yeah. And I listened to everybody else and never listened to myself for
Right.
a long, long time.
Yeah, it's amazing. I see that, you know, so often that, you know, I just tell people, I said, look, you know, you would do fine if you got out of the way of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, a lot of this, too, is what I like to call ownership. I mean, we're all going to own something. You're going to own the exercise and the benefits that's given you, and the fact that you have more energy and you sleep better and you've lost this weight, and you used to be on 4 different medications, now you're on no medications. I mean, you're either going to own that, or you're going to own this, you know, self-deprecating, bad attitude, don't get off the couch,
Mm-hmm.
more pain, die
Oh, yeah.
quicker. I mean, we're going to own something.
Yeah. another
And-
form of slow suicide. You
Right.
know?
No, that's exactly right. And I think about that so often. And even people that don't have, as dramatic a problem as you had, where you were so overweight and you were, you had type 2 diabetes because of that, and all those kind of issues. Is that really what are we doing? Are we coming home and just sitting there and watching TV and waiting to die, or are we actually acting alive? Are we actually doing something that really is of greater benefit? To ourselves, to our health, and ultimately to other people. I mean, you're sharing this. This is an unbelievable benefit to other people as well. Whether you think so or not, it is. I mean, it's really cool. So, what about excuses? You've talked a lot about this, and that you made a lot of excuses. I'm painful. I have this problem. I should be on disability. I mean, all of these different excuses. And I like to talk about the difference between making and getting excuses. Making excuses are the rationale we tell ourselves to, in real time to not do something.
Mm-hmm.
Getting excuses are exactly the opposite. Now, you, more than a lot of people, actually had some real excuses in there. I mean, I understand, you had the first major motor vehicle accident in 1980.
81. Yeah.
81, and then you had a motorcycle accident in
05.
in 05, and you've had what, 27 surgeries?
26 surgeries, yeah.
26 surgeries, all from
From
essentially
abdominal,
all.
from basically from the first accident,
So from trauma,
from trauma. Yeah.
right? So crushed vertebrae, 26 surgeries. So if anyone's going to have chronic pain and an excuse to not be active, it's going to be you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you still got through that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you didn't get through that by making excuses. You got through that by getting excuses. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, I have two excuses that live outside in a pen. They're my labs. When it's cold and it's dark and it's wet outside and I don't want to go for a run, I know I need to take those dogs for a run, or else they're going to dig a hole out of there and they're going to destroy everything in my yard.
Mm-hmm.
So I have an excuse. I think the most powerful excuse that most people have is the accountability of an exercise partner or a diet partner. And you've been involved in this organization called TOPS,
Mm-hmm.
and that's obviously been a very powerful excuse for you to continue doing what you're doing. Is that correct?
Oh, very much so. Very
Okay.
much so. Finding a group of people that are basically on the same journey that you're on,
Mm-hmm.
and you can glean information from them, they can glean information from you. I don't think you can set yourself up any better.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we talk about nutrition, we talk about everything that can help us benefit, and we talk about the bad stuff that happens, throughout,
Mm-hmm.
and share that back and forth. Back to getting information, the diabetic center that I went to over at Lebanon has fantastic information with it.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I went through the program, I didn't listen. I used those excuses not to listen because, well, that's good for somebody else, but I can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
It won't work for me. You don't understand. I hurt. I don't feel good. Sure, if you were feeling better, then maybe it would work for some of this other stuff. And I went back through the program again and listened and heard what they were saying. And I think there's a big difference between listening and hearing what
Mhm.
somebody is really, honestly saying. And so thankful for those folks over there and for you, to help us out in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing task. One of the things that you brought up that I hadn't looked at was you talking to the patient as a doctor, giving them information, and me talking to a patient or someone else who has gone through that same situation that they're going through,
Mm-hmm.
or they can go through if they're willing to get up off the couch and do it, is the same direction but two different points.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah, I think the way I look at that is, I think I have a pretty good grasp of the principles, but that's maybe very intellectually engaging, and for a lot of people that's helpful. But you're kind of more the proof, which if you take these principles and you exercise and you exercise the principles and you do them, you will be successful. I'm sorry, you don't have a choice. You'll be successful if you do it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really how it is.
It really is how it is.
You know, you know, but that's kind of more emotionally appealing, which I think is more motivating for people. I mean, I think that, you know, this may sound a little bit cold, but I think, you know, as humans, we do things because we feel they're in our best interest. They may not be in our best interest, but for whatever reason, emotionally, we feel they are. You know, we're going to get into, you know, in a little bit here, you know, what you actually ate.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when you had the giant popcorn bowl and the 1.5 liters of Diet Pepsi every night, for whatever reason, emotionally, you thought that was in your best interest, or else you wouldn't have done it.
Of course.
You know? So we make excuses, from my perspective, because of fear and pain. Now, you obviously had a tremendous amount of pain that drove you into the behaviors that ended up being, you know, very destructive and ended up at 407 pounds. What about fears? And more specifically, what do you know, having had the success you've had already, what do you fear now?
Allowing myself to go back to where I once was is a big fear. It also is that fear is a good motivator, you know, to keep out and keep doing what I'm doing. Fear is not necessarily a bad thing. I always thought it was. Was absolutely one of the worst things, you know, that this could happen, blah, blah, blah. It's terrible, you know. Don't go there, it's fearful, you know. It is an incredible motivator to get back and go ahead and do the do. I fear sometimes of you know, my hip or my knees, you know, pushing too hard. And so I'm very mindful when I get that extra pain to how much I will allow it to go.
Right. You know the difference between having an injury and exercising through an injury, which is not the smartest thing to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, okay, this is a little bit sore. Because you've dealt with pain, and obviously you deal with pain every day.
Oh yeah,
You can't not with what's happened to you. But how much pain do you have now compared to how much pain you had, you know, 2-3 years ago?
I would think it was about 80% less.
Really?
I really do.
And you're not taking, you know, like a handful of oxycodone a day?
I'm not taking that. I used to take ibuprofen in massive doses. Not doing any of that. I take an aspirin a day, 81 milligrams, just to be. I'm getting to the age where I think it should be a necessity. I take a multivitamin, and I take some allergy pills from time to time when hay fever season comes up, and that's it. You know.
Yeah, it really is. It really is amazing, the power of. I mean, because I don't know that the weight loss has much to do with it. But the power of activity as being a pain reliever always just blows my mind. I mean, because you have very objective reasons to have pain. And, you know, we see a lot of this, unfortunately, on the other side from a medical perspective, where, you know, people kind of get into this trap of, you know, chronic narcotics, which may help lessen the pain to a degree, but in the long run, I think they have more pain. I mean, I think they blunt all of those receptors that normally get, you know, activated when you are doing something painful, like, you know, exercising and, you know, pushing yourself. But then you have less pain. You know, you may have more pain for that half an hour, or 2 hours during the day, but the rest of the time you're better off because you're training your body, you're training your metabolism, you're training those pain receptors to, you know, deal with pain, and then you have less pain. I mean, it really is amazing.
Yeah, it is.
But you really have to kind of walk through that curtain of fear that says, you know what, yeah, it's going to be painful, and yes, it's going to be a little bit scary, but you know what, I'm going to do it anyways because, you know, this is what it means to train, and I have the awareness, and I have the ownership. I'm going to own something, and I'd rather own a good life than own a crappy one any day. Fantastic. Okay, so getting back to a little bit of practical stuff, what do you eat?
I eat, when I do eat meat, I usually eat it a couple times a week. I'll use elk or venison. I'll use grouse or sometimes turkey. meat, make sure that it's breast meat on the turkey, that it's not getting much of the skin in or any of the fat in it. Mostly vegetables. I do a lot of vegetables, stir fry. I put them in the microwave rather than using a lot of oil. When I do use oil, I try to use a good form of oil for me. I like olive oil, canola oil, that kind of stuff. I once in a while I'll have something that maybe I shouldn't ought to have, but I won't deny myself anything. And I found myself learning that if I deny myself a candy bar that I've been wanting for the last 3 days or 4 days, I will eat myself to it. And what I mean by that,
Right.
I will eat anything and everything that's not moving, and some things that may be, cruising across the table, just to be until I get what I need to do to get satisfied with that stuff.
So you'd have been
So
better off if
why
you
not
just
have a bite of it? Or I don't go get the giant
right.
bars anymore. Why not have a bite of it, or have one and have it, satisfy what I'm doing, rather than overeating to get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I also take account of how many calories it is, and honestly, I'll write it down. If this has
Right.
been, ingested into my system, this needs to be taken care of. And I try to do the best with the less processed the foods are, the better they are for you. And I stick with that a lot.
Yeah.
So if I can get stuff out of the fresh garden, that is fantastic.
Yeah, we have and if you combine the rates of obesity and overweight in the United States, we have we're approaching 70%. And when you look at how much, refined carbohydrate and processed food, I don't know that it's a mystery. It's like when you're eating food that's pre-digested and your body doesn't have to do anything to it, and we're overweight, maybe that's not a mystery. Show us the bowls. It's show and tell time here.
Okay.
So,
This was my popcorn bowl.
okay.
And I would sometimes eat 2 of these a night, along with my liter or liter and a half of Diet Pepsi. I really think the aspartame in the Diet Pepsi is very addictive. And so in my own personal thought,
I don't have the data yet, but I tell you, there's something nasty. That
You
stuff
know,
does something.
it really does. It makes me want more, and I'm not satisfied with it. I want more to drink.
I think it makes.
more
I think
water,
it makes.
more
think.
something.
I think it's an appetite stimulant. Personally, I don't have the hard data on that.
I don't
but
have any data on it at all. It's just the way I feel about it.
well, because that's how it made you behave.
Yeah, really.
Okay, so this is the popcorn bowl.
That's the popcorn
So this was
bowl.
a snack.
That was my snack. yeah.
Okay. Well, that's lovely.
Or this was a snack for my ice cream. When I put it in a bowl, would usually add some pop to it, root beer or whatever. Most of the time I ate the half-gallon box once the lid was opened up and the box
Right.
was empty. That was when I was finished.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it?
And
Okay, so then what's this little fella for?
this is the bowl I eat out of today. And my daughter got me these bowls, pretty normal little soup bowl. But I'll put my vegetables in here and season them up with either paprika or cumin or curry powder or something so they're not bland all the time. And I'll measure out how much I have of the stir fry and make sure that I'm up with my calorie count. I do this about 4 or 5 times a day so I don't get hungry. And found out that I've tried to do it just 3 times a day and found out that it doesn't work well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I tell people that I really think that there's 3 big mistakes in eating. Okay, and clearly, exercise is really important, especially for diabetics. It's as important, I think, as diet. But as far as weight loss, it's hard to lose weight just with exercise. I mean, diet's far more critical as far as weight loss. And I think people make 3 big mistakes. The first one is way too much carbohydrate and way too much refined carbohydrate. We have just now had a study from I believe it's the CDC. There's a national health survey that they do that is basically continuously ongoing. And the number one food product that's the highest percentage of daily calories on average for Americans is soft drinks. It's 7% of our daily calorie input. It's amazing. And what's really fascinating is there's a new study that just came out from the Nurses Health Study, which has been going on for decades. And they found that even one soft drink a day increases significantly your risk for type 2 diabetes. And if you have 2 soft drinks a day, it virtually doubles your risk.
Wow.
It's amazing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, really, really amazing stuff. And so, I mean, this all kind of ties in. So really fascinating. So back to the 3 issues. Too much carbohydrate, too much refined carbohydrate, mindless eating. Hello.
Especially sitting in front of the TV.
Yeah, I think
that was one of my worst things. Laying on the couch watching TV.
This is the mindless eating crop of of all time. And then the third one, I think, which is really I never really thought about because it never had been part of my behaviors, is eating once a day or eating twice a day. And I think it's really clear that especially if you're on a lower calorie diet, that if you can split that up into 4, even 6 meals a day, it keeps the engine running. It's training your metabolism to be in burning mode and not in storage mode, and you're less hungry.
Yeah.
So let's.
It also slow down, with your eating.
Oh, absolutely. I'm terrible at that. I don't talk about that because I don't do it. I eat too much. Right.
I used to suck it down so fast; it's just amazing. It would make me wonder where it went, and then, I would be still hungry afterwards because I didn't allow my body to metabolism to catch up to anything at all.
So let's see what happens. What this bowl gets you. We're going to see a little example of what this bowl will get you.
This is not my biggest pair of pants. My biggest pair of pants were size 64, and that's when I was at 407 pounds. These are size 58s, and that was when I was about 330, 340 pounds.
So these at one point were your skinny jeans?
These were my skinny jeans.
Okay, wow, that's pretty mind-blowing.
And I wore a 5X t-shirt.
Big difference. 5X t-shirt. Where are you in now, medium?
This is a large.
Yeah, it's one of my largest.
Large ones, and these are 36 size pants, and I can get into 34s.
Awesome, but that's when you're clubbing.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
Going out dancing.
Yeah, excellent. So, to kind of wrap things up, an accident affected your life, but you never got to where you didn't want to go by accident.
Yeah.
The accident affected you. I talked a bit about ownership. What are you willing to own? There's another side to ownership, and it's what's owning you. That accident owned your life for 3 decades.
Oh, it did. Yeah.
And
I allowed it to get there.
But still, it was a terrible thing, and we don't want to lessen the realities of those pains, but it doesn't have to own you.
No.
And so an accident changed your life. You didn't get to where you didn't want to go by accident. You got there as what I like to say, unpurpose. UN purpose. There really wasn't any purpose, so you just kind of did this thing to dull the pain, and it didn't work out. But you got to where you are now by just changing one vowel. You changed that U to an O. You got there on purpose.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, Larry, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you again for your time and your passion. I hope this is helpful to lots more people than just myself, and I know it will be, because this is just too good a story not to share. Thanks again.
No, thank you.